In the heart of a forgotten village, shrouded in mist and regret, the whispers of the past lingered like a heavy fog. The women of the town, once vibrant and full of life, had become mere shadows of themselves, haunted by a sinister presence that seemed to seep through the very walls of their homes. It began with strange occurrences, mirrors shattering without cause, faint cries echoing through the night, and the unsettling sensation of being watched. As the moon waxed, the villagers spoke in hushed tones of an ancient curse, born from a betrayal that ran deep within their history. The legend told of a woman scorned, a healer cast out for her forbidden knowledge, who vowed to return when the moon was full, exacting revenge on those who had wronged her. The remaining women, their faces drawn and weary, felt the weight of her gaze upon them, each haunted by their own secrets and regrets. As the full moon approached, a palpable tension filled the air, and one by one, the women began to disappear, leaving behind only their screams echoing in the night. In a desperate bid to understand the horror that was unfolding, a group of brave souls gathered in the old church, the last bastion of hope against the encroaching darkness. They lit candles, their flickering flames casting long, trembling shadows that danced along the walls, and shared their stories, tales of betrayal, loss and guilt that bound them together. The more they spoke, the stronger the presence grew, until it was almost tangible, a cold breath against their skin. Suddenly the door burst open with a deafening crash, revealing a figure cloaked in darkness. Her face was obscured, but her voice pierced through the silence like a dagger. "You thought you could escape me," she hissed, her tone a mixture of sorrow and wrath. As she stepped forward, the candles flickered violently, casting grotesque shadows that twisted into the forms of those who had vanished. The women recoiled in horror, realizing that they were not only battling a vengeful spirit, but also their own inner demons, manifestations of their guilt and fears. With each revelation, the tension mounted, and the walls seemed to close in around them. The village, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison, each stone steeped in the weight of their shared history. Desperation turned to resolve as they began to confront their pasts, each woman stepping forward to face the spectre of the healer, pleading for forgiveness and understanding. Yet the figure only laughed, a sound that chilled them to the bone. "Forgiveness is not yours to give," she replied, her voice dripping with disdain. As the clock struck midnight, the air crackled with energy, and the women realized they had one last chance to break the curse. They joined hands, forming a circle, and began to chant the words passed down through generations, invoking the spirits of their ancestors for strength. The very ground trembled beneath them, and the air grew thick with an unearthly presence. The healer's laughter turned to shrieks of rage as the energy surged, illuminating the dark corners of the church. In that moment of desperation, the women felt an awakening within them, an ancient power that had been suppressed for far too long. They summoned their collective pain, transforming it into a fierce resolve, and directed it at the spirit before them. The figure writhed and contorted, the darkness peeling away to reveal the woman's true form, a visage of sorrow rather than malice. In the final confrontation, they understood that the curse could only be broken by acknowledging their own complicity in the past, by embracing the past, by embracing the pain instead of running from it. As the first light of dawn broke through the stained glass windows, the healer's screams subsided, replaced by a haunting silence. The spirit, now stripped of its rage, looked upon them with a mix of longing and sorrow, a final plea for reconciliation. With a collective breath, the women stepped forward, reaching out to the figure, not as enemies, but as sisters bound by the shared weight of history. In that moment, forgiveness was offered, and the ancient curse shattered like glass, the fragments scattering into the light. As dawn broke, the village began to awaken from its long slumber, the air lighter, filled with the promise of renewal. The women, now freed from the chains of their past, stood together, stronger than ever, ready to reclaim their lives and their stories from the depths of horror that had once consumed them. As dawn spilled its golden light over the village, the air shimmered with a sense of hope, yet an unsettling calm lingered, a reminder of the darkness that had almost consumed them. The women stood together, their hearts racing with a mixture of relief and lingering fear, unsure of what lay ahead. In the aftermath of their confrontation, the world felt altered, as if the very fabric of reality had shifted. They ventured out into the streets, still lined with the remnants of their past. The houses, once foreboding, now appeared worn but welcoming. Birds chirped cautiously, as if testing the air for danger. Yet, something was amiss. The ground felt different under their feet, as if it were alive, pulsing with the energy of the resolution they had forged. Whispers danced around them, soft yet insistent, reminding them of the women who had vanished and the lives forever altered. The first to speak was Alara, the unofficial leader of the group, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "We must honor those who have been lost," she urged, her eyes scanning the faces of her friends. "We owe it to them to understand why this happened and to ensure it never occurs again," the others nodded, their expressions a mix of determination and sorrow. They made their way to the old well at the center of the village, a place steeped in history and myth. It was said to be the heart of their community, a source of both life and despair. Gathering around it, they felt the weight of the stories it held: loves lost, dreams shattered, and fears unspoken. They decided to share their own experiences, not only of the hauntings that had plagued them, but also of their regrets and guilt that had bound them in silence. As they shared, the well seemed to respond, the water within it rippling and shimmering, as if it were listening. One by one, they spoke of their own sins, unfaithfulness, betrayal, and complicity in the village's dark history. With each confession, the atmosphere grew heavier, a weight pressing down on them, but also a catharsis that began to lift the fog of despair. Then, from the depths of the well, a low, melodic voice rose, weaving through the air like a forgotten lullaby. It was the spirit of the healer, now unbound and resonating with the women's shared pain. "You have taken the first step," the voice echoed, rich and soothing. "To heal the past, you must confront it together." Suddenly, the village transformed before their eyes. They were surrounded by visions, ghostly figures appearing in the mist, scenes of their ancestors playing out like a forgotten film. They saw the healer as she once was, a woman of compassion, healing the sick and mending the broken, before betrayal had twisted her heart into a vessel of vengeance. The visions revealed the complex web of choices that led to her curse, showing that each woman was connected to the others through threads of sorrow and guilt. With each scene, the women felt their own fears rising again. The darkness that had threatened to consume them now appeared as specters, twisted and grotesque. They realized that to banish the horror, they needed to reclaim their power, not just as individuals, but as a united front. Together, they began to chant, weaving the words of their ancestors with their own, calling forth strength and unity. The air crackled with energy, and the village seemed to pulse in response. They felt the spirit of the healer drawing closer, no longer vengeful but seeking forgiveness. "I was lost, as were you," she whispered, her voice now filled with warmth. "In facing our fears, we find our truth. Only together can we break the chains of our past." As the final words left their lips, a blinding light enveloped them, and they felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over the village. The spectres faded, replaced by a tranquil stillness that settled deep within their hearts. The women opened their eyes to find themselves standing in the early morning sun, the weight of their confessions lifting as the last remnants of darkness melted away. With a newfound purpose, they made a pact to preserve the memory of those who had been lost, to ensure that the village learned from its past. They decided to create a place of healing and a community center where stories could be shared, where the truths of their ancestors could be honored, and where the bonds of sisterhood would be forged anew. As they worked to build this sanctuary, they felt the presence of the healer watching over them, a guardian spirit transformed from malice into a guide. The village began to flourish once more, life returning to the streets as laughter echoed where screams had once reigned. Yet, beneath the surface, they understood that the horror they faced would never be fully vanquished. It would always linger, a reminder of their shared humanity. And so, they remained vigilant, fostering an unbreakable bond among themselves and ensuring that the stories of the past were never forgotten. Together, they became the guardians of their village, the women who faced the darkness and emerged stronger, forever intertwined by the lessons learned in the heart of horror. As the sun reached its zenith, bathing the village in a warm, golden glow, the women gathered at the site of their new community center. It had transformed from the old church, a relic of fear, into a vibrant hub of life and resilience. Banners decorated with colourful designs fluttered in the gentle breeze, each symbol representing a story shared and a wound healed. Laughter and chatter filled the air, weaving together a tapestry of connection that enveloped them all. Elara stood at the centre, her heart swelling with pride as she looked around at the faces of her friends. Each woman had embraced her truth, each had transformed her pain into strength. They had spent weeks turning the once ominous church into a space where their community could gather, learn and grow. Now it stood as a beacon of hope, a reminder of the darkness they had overcome. As they prepared for the opening ceremony, Elara took a moment to reflect. The village had changed. It felt alive, pulsating with energy and possibility. The weight of their past had not vanished, but it had been integrated into their lives in a way that felt empowering rather than oppressive. They were no longer just survivors, they were thriving, a collective force of healing. The ceremony began with a circle of gratitude, each woman taking turns to express her appreciation for the strength and support they had found in one another. As their voices rose in harmony, the air shimmered with a palpable energy, a reflection of the bond they had forged. Elara spoke of the healer, her spirit guiding them even now, and how the darkness that had once threatened to consume them had become the soil in which their new lives had taken root. Just as they reached the climax of their celebration, a sudden chill swept through the gathering. The laughter faded, and an uneasy silence fell over the crowd. The sky darkened momentarily, shadows creeping along the edges of the sunlight. The women exchanged nervous glances, instinctively tightening their circle, as if to shield themselves from an unseen threat. Elara stepped forward, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. "We've faced the darkness before. Whatever this is, we can face it together." Just as she finished speaking, a cold wind gusted through the centre, extinguishing the candles that had flickered in the gentle breeze moments before. Gasps echoed through the crowd, the joyous atmosphere now thick with tension. From the shadows, a familiar figure emerged, one cloaked in darkness, yet emanating a sense of urgency rather than malice. It was the spirit of the healer, her expression one of desperation. "You must remember," she urged, her voice echoing like a haunting melody. "The balance is fragile. The past will always seek to reclaim what it lost." Confusion rippled through the crowd. Elara stepped closer, her heart racing. "What do you mean? We've broken the curse. We've embraced our truth." The healer's voice quavered as she spoke. "Your bond is strong, but the scars remain. Those who were lost are not at peace. Their anger festers in the shadows. They will rise again unless you confront them fully." A collective shiver ran through the women. Elara felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. "What do we need to do?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with concern. "To honor them, to give them a voice," the healer replied, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. "Gather their stories, for only then can you lay their spirits to rest. You must confront not only the darkness of the past but also the shadows within yourselves." Understanding washed over Elara, and she turned to her friends, who now stood resolutely by her side. "We must honor the lost," she declared, her voice rising above the tension. "We will gather their stories, not just for ourselves but for the entire village." With a renewed sense of purpose, they decided to hold a night of remembrance, a gathering where the stories of those who had vanished would be shared and celebrated. It would be a night to honor the past while reaffirming their commitment to the future. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, the village prepared for the night's solemn event. They lit candles along the paths leading to the community center, creating a warm glow that beckoned everyone to join. When night fell, the atmosphere shifted, filled with an electric anticipation. The women stood at the forefront, their hearts pounding, surrounded by villagers who had come to bear witness. One by one, they took turns speaking, sharing the stories of those lost to the darkness, the healer's own story included. With every tale, the weight of grief lightened, replaced by a shared sense of understanding. The air became thick with emotion, and the flickering candlelight cast a gentle glow on their faces. The healer's spirit lingered, watching over them, no longer a figure of vengeance but a symbol of hope. As the last story was told, a silence fell over the crowd. Then, as if in response to their collective acknowledgement, a soft breeze swept through, carrying with it a feeling of peace. The village had come together, forging a bond that transcended fear and pain. With tears glistening in their eyes, the women joined hands, forming a circle once more. Elara spoke, her voice steady and full of conviction. "We have faced the darkness, and we will continue to do so. Together, we honor those who came before us and those who stand with us now. Their stories live on in us, and we are stronger for it." As they spoke the final words of their invocation, a brilliant light burst forth from the center of their circle, illuminating the night sky. The shadows seemed to retreat, and the air filled with the whispers of gratitude from the spirits they had honored. In that moment, the village transformed, not just into a place of healing but into a sanctuary of memory and strength. The women stood united, guardians of their shared history, their hearts swelling with a fierce love for one another and for those they had lost. And as dawn broke once more, the village awoke not to the weight of horror, but to the promise of a new day, forever marked by the lessons learned in the heart of darkness. Together, they would continue to weave their stories, ensuring that no voice was ever silenced again, and that the light would always triumph over the shadows.